The tie I handed over was thrown into the trash can at the corner of the room the next moment. I was dumbfounded by Mike's action.
The last thing I need is cheap trash.
Did you even check inside?
Huh?
On the other side of my astonished husband, Sarah was laughing. I met Mike's eyes before slowly shifting my gaze to Sarah.
You don't think that was from your sister, do you? Sorry, it's so cheap.
Sarah was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike was quite shaken.
No, I thought that was something Mary had prepared. As if anything prepared by Mary could just be thrown away.
I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement at Sarah's furious figure. I'm going to expose all of Mike's actions right here. I took a deep breath. I am Mary, a 47-year-old housewife with a part-time job. Thanks to getting married almost immediately after graduating from college and having children right away, my second life has already started. Even though I say that, Mike is still actively working, and since I've been working a full-time part-time job for about 10 years, we don't go on trips or anything like that. So, honestly, this second life is just a name, and in the end, I'm living a life no different from usual. Mike and I met in college. It was a normal college, but the club activities were active, and among them, the basketball team was one of the strongest in the nation. Mike was the captain of the basketball team. Tall and well-built, he was the captain and the ace. At that time, Mike was very popular, and I, being one of the managers, thought I had no chance. But he approached me, and then he confessed his feelings. I was so happy. The proposal came when I was in my 4th year of college, with Mike already working and able to support us, asking me to marry him. My parents, having been college sweethearts themselves, didn't object, and we got married half a year into my senior year of college. It was a simple wedding, but it was well done, and I was happy. The first year after marriage was very smooth. Since the company Mike joined had frequent relocations, I decided not to become a full-time employee and continued with the part-time job I had at the time. However, I found out I was pregnant just before graduating from college, and to reassure a worried Mike, I resigned. During the pregnancy, my sister-in-law Sarah and my in-laws, who lived nearby, were very kind and helpful, and I was truly glad to have married. However, after our daughter Jane was born, our marital life gradually drifted away from the ideal. Jane, who often cried at night, would start crying unless held during the day, and as a first-time parent who knew nothing about child-rearing, I struggled to balance it with household chores. Although my in-laws and Sarah helped, there inevitably came times when I had to do it alone. Each time, I would hide and cry by myself. Mike, at first, showed a supportive attitude, but gradually began to go out more often for drinks and such, and by the time Jane was 6 months old, he had completely stopped helping with the household chores. Even when I begged him to spend a little more time with Jane, he would reluctantly stay for about 10 minutes before calling me over to take her and going out himself. "Hey, I wish you could spend a little more time with Jane. I'm busy, you know." When I said that, Mike would sigh heavily and condescendingly lecture me. "You wouldn't understand since you've never been out in society, but being an adult is tough. I need to refresh on my days off to survive. Understand?" I absolutely despised the way Mike lightly tapped my head as he said that. However, it's true that Mike was providing for us, and it's also true that I didn't know society. So, every time he said that, I would swallow my words, and eventually, I stopped asking Mike for anything. Thus, Mike continued a life that hardly resembled that of a caring father, only paying attention to Jane when it suited him, for over 20 years. But then he began to take an active interest in Jane. "Jane, let's go out."
"Okay."
Every weekend, I would see the two of them off as they went out together, and I would take care of the household chores. Thanks to starting a part-time job about 10 years ago, We had a bit more financial leeway, but chores would pile up, so I had to clean and prepare meals in advance during the weekends. Up until about 3 years ago, Jane was on my side. She would help out and give me presents. But ever since she started going out with him, she completely became Mike's ally. The reason was simple: Mike would buy her something every week. Jane, coming home with shopping bags full of new clothes and accessories in both hands, initially confused but now delightedly heads straight to her room to have her own fashion show. Buying her expensive things every week might be a bit much. Huh? Are you jealous of Jane? Can't help it. She's cuter than a middle-aged woman like you, Mike said with a laugh and went to Jane's room. Indeed, Jane is lively and bright like Mike, and beautiful. She probably knows it, too, with looks that wouldn't be out of place on a celebrity. As for me, it's inevitable that I'd be called plain. But I am only 45 years old. I shouldn't be referred to as a middle-aged woman. Angered, I decided to confront Mike and Jane and headed to Jane's room. But just as I was about to open the door, I overheard a shocking conversation.
Dad, this is really cute. Thank you.
It suits you. Just like my daughter.
Tell Emma thanks, too. I've wanted something matching with her.
Emma is beautiful, too. The clerk said we looked like a beautiful mother and daughter today.
Really? That makes me happy.
I couldn't understand what the two of them were talking about. Beautiful mother and daughter? Who and who? Weren't they going out together every week? I was dumbfounded, my hand still on the doorknob. I couldn't even wipe away the tears rolling down my cheeks, my body wouldn't move. Unaware of me, Jane and Mike laughed and talked about their next outing. I couldn't stand how much I hated them. The next day, I stopped by a detective agency on my way home from my part-time job. The clerk there was very kind, and I ended up pouring out everything I had been holding in. And just like that, I contracted them to investigate Mike and his activities. Months later, when I received the investigation results, I was dumbfounded. Mike was meeting his mistress nearly every day, and on weekends, he would take Jane on long trips. As I read further, even more shocking details came to light. You've got to be kidding. I was furious at Mike's incredibly disloyal actions. I couldn't forgive him, I would have my revenge. Just then, a message arrived on my mobile phone. It was from Sarah, asking if I would like to join them at the in-laws' house to celebrate Mike's promotion. I hadn't heard a word about Mike getting a promotion, but I resolved to reply to Sarah with my acceptance. I didn't want to buy a gift for the celebration, but it would be strange if I was the only one who didn't bring anything. With that in mind, I decided to let Sarah help me pick something out. The tie we bought from a high-brand store that makes custom suits cost $300. We'll put it in a plain paper bag so he won't immediately realize what's inside.
It's a surprise. I hope he'll be happy.
Yes, indeed. Imagining the joy on her brother's face, Sarah seemed excited, which made me feel a bit guilty, but my desire for revenge on Mike was stronger. I proceeded with my plan. And on the day of Mike's promotion celebration, seeing the plain paper bag I was holding as we left the house, Mike clearly looked disappointed. But he said nothing more, and we headed to the in-laws. Upon arrival, we joined Mike's parents and Sarah at the table, enjoying a pleasant meal together the whole time. Let's give him the presents now. Who wants to go first?
Me. Congratulations, Dad.
Jane handed him a brandless handkerchief. Though neatly boxed, it didn't seem very expensive. Mike received it with a smile. Unusual for brand-loving Mike. Thinking this, I took the box containing the tie out of the paper bag and handed it to Mike. Congratulations on your promotion. This is from me and… The tie I handed over was thrown into the trash can at the corner of the room the next moment. I was dumbfounded by Mike's action.
I don't need cheap trash.
Did you even check inside?
Huh?
Sarah was laughing on the other side of my astonished husband. I met Mike's eyes before slowly shifting my gaze to Sarah.
You don't think that was from your sister, do you? Sorry, it's so cheap.
Sarah was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike was quite shaken.
I thought that was something Mary had prepared. As if anything prepared by Mary could just be thrown away.
I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement at Sarah's furious figure. I'm going to expose all of Mike's actions right here. I took a deep breath. Sarah, it's okay. I don't mind.
But…
Really, it's okay.
After all, I don't need a gift from someone I'm divorcing.
Everyone present was shocked by my words. Mike was trembling, but still tried to calm himself and spoke to me in a soothing voice.
Divorce? I admit I went too far just now. I'll apologize.
It's not just about what happened now. You know that, don't you? Mike was puzzled, unable to grasp my real intention. Amidst this, Jane's carefree voice could be heard.
It's fine if they get divorced. It's none of my business anyway.
Jane. Susan chided Jane as she twirled her long hair, but Jane didn't stop.
I mean, being told that someone who barely went out into society and is just an ordinary middle-aged woman is my mother doesn't make me happy. I'd be much happier with someone who understands fashion.
Jane was probably referring to Mike's mistress. Unaware that I knew about it, Mike looked a bit awkward, to whom I smiled.
Right, Emma, was it? She would make Jane happier, wouldn't she? How do you know about Emma?
Mike panicked when Emma's name, his mistress, suddenly came out of my mouth. Next to him, Jane's attitude remained unchanged. I spoke sarcastically to the two of them.
You've lost your love for me and want to remarry, right? Unfortunately, I don't have such a partner or the time.
No, well… Mike suddenly became hesitant as everyone's gaze focused on him. Jane, perhaps realizing something was off, stopped playing with her hair and looked at Mike.
Making up reasons for cheating and making Jane believe them, you really don't want to look bad, do you? What do you mean?
Jane confronted Mike, puzzled. After all, Mike had told Jane that I was cheating and considering divorce. When Emma was introduced, he said it was still a secret because I was reluctant to divorce, but he intended to marry her as soon as possible. My head hurt when I found out. I had never cheated, and the only reason I was rarely home was because of increased part-time job hours. Lying and bribing your daughter with gifts is the lowest a parent could go.
Dad, you said Mom was cheating, and you wanted a divorce but she was refusing, right? Was that a lie?
It's not a lie, but…
If it's not a lie, then why is Mom so confident?
Jane's shrill voice echoed in the room. I responded calmly. It was more convenient to deceive you.
That way, it would be easier to see Jane after the divorce, or for him to return to his parents' house, probably for reasons like that. It's a lie, a lie.
Jane repeated it's a lie as if she couldn't believe my words. Mike was pale and frozen. I handed him the divorce papers.
Wait on the divorce.
You plan to marry Emma, right?
Jane seems to get along with her, so there shouldn't be a problem. But we've been married for over 20 years. There are feelings. What you have isn't feelings for me, but for the money you don't want to part with is alimony, right?
When I spoke plainly, Mike grimaced and glared at me. Even if he was hit right on the mark, he was no longer the man I once admired, just a middle-aged man. I realized then that his love for me was gone.
Is that true?
Sarah's voice echoed in the quiet room. Mike started to tremble. In this house, the most frightening person isn't the in-laws but Sarah. Sarah, who had been cheated on in her youth and had broken off an engagement, has remained single since. Unlike Mike, Sarah graduated from a top university and was so beautiful that men constantly pursued her even after her engagement was broken off. But Sarah rejected them all.
You know how much I despise men who cheat, right?
Yes.
Then why did you do this? What did you want to achieve by hurting Mary?
Sarah spoke calmly, but a quiet anger could be felt in her voice, silencing not just Mike but everyone in the room. Mike was so pale and trembling, he looked as if he might collapse.
What you can do now is sign the divorce papers, pay the compensation, and then cut ties with our family. Got it? Cut ties? Why? Because I don't want a despicable man to be part of the family.
Shocked by Sarah's words, Mike hung his head. It must have been hard for Mike, who has a bit of a sister complex. He signed the divorce papers and then started crying softly, his body shaking.
Mary is the one who should be crying. You have no right to cry.
Sarah's words were like a final blow, and Mike had no response. I presented another document to Mike, delivering the final strike.
Emma left this for you. You met with Emma?
Mike, who perked up at Emma's name, panicked upon seeing the contents of the document I presented. It was about the compensation claims.
What do you mean by compensation claims?
Well, you lied about being single, right?
Ah.
Mike had completely forgotten that he had lied. In fact, Mike and Emma met at a high-end hotel's matchmaking party, where Mike had forged documents to attend as a single man and approached Emma. He even went as far as to say that the reason for his divorce was his ex-wife's cheating, claiming the divorce was finalized but his ex-wife wouldn't leave, causing trouble for him and his daughter, but she was just doing housekeeping now, so he was dealing with it as hiring a housekeeper. He continued to say that once a new partner was found, his ex-wife would give up on reconciliation and leave, asking Emma to wait a bit longer. When I heard this from Emma herself, I was furious. After showing her our marriage certificate and explaining that we were not divorced and I had not cheated, Emma apologized repeatedly. She offered to pay compensation, but I had no intention of claiming it since she had been misled into thinking Mike was single. Emma has a message for you.
Never show your face to her again.
Ah. Mike must have been planning to have Emma support him financially in exchange for paying me compensation. His expression was one of utter despair. Mom. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Jane apologized from next to a silent Mike. I have no need for a daughter who can't distinguish right from wrong at 25 and disrespects her mother. No need to apologize.
Mom.
Once the divorce is finalized, leave my house.
Why?
Jane asked, to which I sighed. The house we lived in was actually in my name. It was left to me when a relative passed away, and I became the owner when Mike and I started living there. I had mentioned this to Jane before, but she seemed to have completely forgotten. Your attitude towards your mother is unforgivable, and the period for reconciliation has passed. I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave with your dad.
I'll apologize. Come on, Mom. Let's live together again. Please.
Jane screamed in desperation, but I looked at her coldly. Then, Susan, who had been silent until now, spoke up.
Mike and Jane, please never come back here again. But Mom.
Mike looked up at Susan's words. Susan was furious. Seeing her like that, Mike couldn't hide his shock and started crying heavily. Jane was just frozen, shocked by the usually gentle Susan's transformation.
I don't want to talk to people who hurt others like you do. Please leave.
So, after Susan's declaration, Joe, my father-in-law, stood up, grabbed Mike by his clothes, forced him to stand, and dragged him to the front door, pushing him out of the house. Mike initially banged on the door and shouted to be let in, but as neighbors started to gather, he eventually left with Jane. In the quiet of the in-laws' house, now that Mike and Jane were gone, I savored the coffee and cake Susan offered, enjoying some peace for the first time in a while. After that, I submitted the divorce papers. With the compensation from Mike, I've become somewhat wealthy. As for Mike, not only did I take all his hidden savings, but his forgery at the matchmaking party became widely known after a colleague who had also attended the party exposed him at work. As a result, he lost his credibility and, despite his recent promotion, was sidelined. Jane made a big mistake at work and, although she wasn't fired, her salary was significantly cut. Moreover, I heard she got involved with a married coworker and is currently being sued for compensation by his wife. I couldn't help but think of them as two peas in a pod, almost feeling detached from their plight. The two of them have been living together after being kicked out of the house. However, since I did all the household chores, neither of them knows how to manage a home. The house is a mess. They constantly eat out due to their inability to cook, which has drained their finances, and they seem to argue every day. Emma, after breaking up with Mike, married her childhood friend. I've heard through the grapevine that she's now the mother of twins. Despite being deeply hurt by Mike, it's comforting to know she has moved on to a happier future. I was relieved. I was worried that my relationship with my in-laws and Sarah would end because of Mike's actions, but we're still close. Sarah says I'm her sister, and something like this won't sever our bond. I'm grateful to be part of such a kind family. And, surprisingly, Sarah has recently found a boyfriend. He's 5 years older than her, a kind man who managed to soften Sarah's firm resolve against marriage. Susan, who sneakily bought a bridal magazine. It's a secret. And was reading it in her room, shared her secret with me, looking so endearing it warmed my heart. As for me, I was offered a full-time position at the company where I was working part-time and have been working hard. Life is as busy as ever, but living for myself alone is quite enjoyable. Selling the house and starting to live on my own was a shock, especially since all my belongings fit into just one cardboard box. Now, I'm gradually acquiring furniture that suits my taste. Living surrounded by things I love makes me incredibly happy, and no matter how busy I am, coming home always rejuvenates me, fueling my energy for the next day. I even think to myself that I should have done this much sooner. Recently, a coworker offered to give me a cat. The idea of living with a cat doesn't sound too bad. With these thoughts in my mind, I'm determined to live my life in my own way today.